Holy shit, crash landing on an alien planet was not part of the plan, but Kai had no idea fate was waiting for him under these strange stars. The stars glittered like scattered gems across the vast, endless sky, their faint light flickering through the cracked window of Kai's old, rickety spaceship. He was a lone wanderer, always chasing the rush of the unknown, a human explorer with a restless spirit and a hunger for adventure. But as his ship tore through the atmosphere of an uncharted planet, disaster struck. A piercing screech shattered the quiet, and the control panel lit up with a frantic mess of red warning lights. Critical failure, the computer reported, its calm voice maddening. Kai's hands darted across the controls, desperate to steady the ship, but it was no use. The vessel plunged toward the alien world below, a blazing comet in the dusky sky. The crash was brutal. Metal screeched and crumpled as the ship gouged a rough trench through a forest of glowing, towering trees. Kai's body slammed against his harness, his breath coming in sharp gasps as darkness swallowed him. When he woke, the air was heavy with the smell of burnt circuits and something else, sweet, floral, alive. Shaking, he unstrapped himself and staggered out into the strange new world, his boots sinking into soft, mossy earth. Weird musical chirps filled the air, and the trees pulsed with a soft, rhythmic light. This was Nytheria, a planet untouched by human maps, and Kai had no clue what lay ahead. His first thought was survival. Find cover, fix the ship, get out. But as he pushed through the glowing underbrush, a sound froze him in his tracks. A weak, eerie cry, high and desperate. It wasn't human, but its raw panic hit him hard. Heart racing, he followed it until he stumbled into a clearing. There, trapped under the wreckage of another ship, was an elderly alien woman. Her pale blue skin shimmered faintly, covered in glowing marks that dimmed with her fading strength. White braids spilled across the ground, and her huge glowing eyes met his, pleading, yet full of quiet dignity. Her torn robes, once grand, hinted at her importance. "Hey, hang on!" Kai shouted, dropping to her side. He wasn't sure she'd understand, but his tone said it all. The twisted metal pinning her was heavy, stubborn. Spotting a thick branch nearby, he grabbed it and jammed it under the debris. With a grunt, he pushed, muscles burning as the wreckage creaked. The alien woman strained too, her thin arms shaking until she finally slid free and crumpled beside him. The branch snapped as the metal slammed back down, but she was out. Her warm hand gripped his arm. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft and musical, ringing clear in his head despite the alien words. His translator implant buzzed, making sense of her language. "I am Elder Vexa of Nytheria. Who are you?" "Kai," he replied, panting. "From Earth. My ship went down nearby. I heard you and I couldn't walk away." Her eyes sparked with surprise. "A human? Here?" The stars have a strange sense of humor. She winced, pressing a hand to her ribs. "Rebels attacked me. They're after my family, my granddaughter. I have to reach her." Kai's mind spun. Rebels? A granddaughter? This wasn't just a crash, it was a crisis. "Who's your granddaughter? What's happening?" "Her name is Zara," Vexa said, her voice firming with purpose. "Princess of Nytheria. I'm her grandmother, once queen, now her shield. The rebels want our throne, our lives. They hit my ship. But you've given me hope." Kai didn't think twice. "Then let's find her. Can you move?" Vexa nodded, grimacing as she stood. "My legs hurt, but I'll manage. The palace isn't far. We can warn Zara there." Leaning on Kai, she hobbled through the glowing forest, its air buzzing with hidden life. As they went, Vexa explained Nytheria, a world of high-tech and old ways now torn by rebellion. The royal family tied to the planet's balance was both loved and hated. The rebels craved power, not harmony, and they'd kill to take it. The trees finally opened to reveal the Nytherian palace, a stunning sprawl of crystal towers and flowing gardens, lit by twin moons. Its beauty was unreal, a glimpse of a world beyond Earth's dreams. Armored guards ran to them, their faces tight with worry. "Elder Vexa," one cried, dropping to a knee. "We thought you were lost when your ship didn't arrive." "Rebels," she snapped. "This human, Kai, saved me. He brought me here." They hurried into the grand hall, its walls alive with shifting holograms, the floor glowing underfoot. Then she appeared, Zara, the princess. She was a vision, her lavender skin catching the light, her long white hair flowing like silk, and her fox-like ears twitching as she turned. Her fur-trimmed gown clung to her, fierce yet graceful. "Grandmother," Zara's voice sang with relief as she ran to Vexa, hugging her tight. "I was so afraid." Vexa managed a faint smile. "Kai pulled me from the wreck. He's a friend." Zara's violet eyes flicked to Kai, sharp and warm. "Thank you, Kai. You've saved more than you realize." Her smile hit him like a spark, and his heart skipped. "Happy to help," he said, dipping his head, though he couldn't look away. "Call me Zara," she said, stepping closer. "Stay with us. You're our guest now." Servants whisked Vexa away for care, leaving Zara to show Kai the palace, rooms of drifting lights, gardens with singing flowers, a balcony under a sea of stars. They talked easily, his stories of Earth's rugged wilds lighting her up, her tales of Nitherian lore pulling him in. Something crackled between them, quiet but real. By the glowing pond in the gardens, under the silver moons, Zara's voice dropped. "Kai, you're different. Brave, kind, human," tightened, pulse racing. "I feel it too, Zara, like we were meant to meet." Their faces inched closer, breaths mixing, lips almost touching, when a massive boom rocked the palace. Alarm screamed and Zara's eyes flared with fear. "The rebels!" Kai jumped up, grabbing her hand. "Where do we go?" "Secret passage," she said, yanking him toward a hidden wall. Shouts and gunfire exploded behind them as rebels stormed in, weapons glinting. "Princess Zara," one growled. "You're coming with us." Kai blocked her, fists ready. "Not happening." Guards clashed with the rebels, steel ringing in chaos. Kai and Zara slipped into the tunnel, sealing it as the fight raged. The passage stretched on, the sounds of battle fading. "We can't stay," Zara gasped. "If they're inside, the safe room's useless. We have to leave Nitheria." Kai stared. "Leave the planet?" "There's a shuttle in the mountains," she said, resolute. "It's our shot." They burst into the night, the palace burning in the distance, smoke twisting upward. Hand in hand, they sprinted for the mountains, fear and thrill driving them. The forest whipped by, alive with risk and possibility. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. A human and an alien princess, tied by a rescue, a rebellion, and a bond too strong to ignore. The night air of Nitheria was thick with the scent of blooming vines and the distant tang of smoke. As Kai and Zara raced through the glowing forest, their hands still clasped tightly. The palace's fiery glow faded behind them, but the echoes of chaos, shouts, gunfire, and the crackle of collapsing crystal lingered in their ears. Each step through the undergrowth felt like a heartbeat, urgent and unsteady, as they plunged deeper into the mountain's shadow. The twin moons cast silver light through the canopy, painting Zara's lavender skin in shimmering hues, her white hair a wild cascade as she moved with the grace of a hunted creature, fierce yet vulnerable. Kai's pulse thundered, not just from the sprint, but from the electric warmth of her hand in his. Every glance at her, those sharp, violet eyes scanning the darkness, her fur-clad form cutting through the brush, stirred something deep in him, a mix of protectiveness and a longing he couldn't name. But there was no time to dwell on it. The rebels were out there, their pursuit a looming threat, and the hidden shuttle was their only hope of escape. "Keep up," Zara whispered, her voice low but urgent, her breath catching as she pulled him over a gnarled root. "The shuttle's in a cave just beyond the ridge. We're close." Kai nodded, his chest heaving. "You sure it's still there?" If they hit the palace, they might have found it. Her eyes flicked to his, a flash of defiance. "It's hidden. My grandmother made sure of that. Vex is no fool, she's outsmarted worse than these traitors." They ducked beneath a curtain of glowing vines, the soft hum of Nitheria's wildlife pulsing around them. The path grew steeper, rocks slipping under their boots, and Kai steadied Zara as she stumbled, his arms circling her waist for a fleeting moment. Her body pressed against his, warm and firm, and for a split second, time seemed to pause. Her gaze locked onto his, lips parted, and the air between them crackled with unspoken tension. Then a distant shout snapped them back, and they were running again, hearts pounding in sync. The cave loomed ahead, a dark maw carved into the mountainside, its entrance half hidden by luminous moss. Zara led the way, slipping inside with Kai close behind. The air turned cool, damp, and heavy with the scent of stone. In the dim light, Kai could just make out the sleek outline of the shuttle, a compact, silver craft nestled in the shadows, its hull gleaming faintly like a sleeping beast. Zara's fingers flew over a hidden panel on the cave wall, and a soft click echoed as the shuttle's hatch hissed open. "Get in," she urged, her voice tight with urgency. But before they could move, a low hum vibrated through the cave. A ship, too close. Kai's stomach dropped as red lights flickered outside, casting jagged shadows across the entrance. "They're here," he hissed, pulling Zara behind a rocky outcrop. Her body pressed against his in the tight space, her breath warm against his neck. The closeness sent a shiver down his spine, but he forced himself to focus. How many? She peered out, her fox-like ears twitching. 3, maybe 4. Light scout ship, rebels, not palace guards. Her hand gripped his arm, nails digging in slightly. "They'll check the cave. We need to move now." Kai scanned the shuttle, its open hatch tauntingly close. "Can we make it?" Her eyes met his, fierce and determined. "We have to." They broke from cover, sprinting for the shuttle as the hum grew louder. Kai dove inside first, pulling Zara in after him. The hatch slammed shut just as boots crunched outside, voices barking in a harsh alien tongue. Kai's heart pounded as he scrambled to the controls, Zara sliding into the co-pilot's seat. Her fingers danced over the panel, bringing the shuttle to life with a low, thrumming roar. Come on," Kai muttered, his hands gripping the unfamiliar controls. The console was a maze of alien symbols, but Zara's quick instructions guided him. The shuttle lurched upward, scraping the cave ceiling as it powered up. Outside, a rebel shouted, and a blast scorched the cave wall, sending sparks flying. Zara's hands moved faster, overriding safety protocols. "Hold tight," she yelled, and the shuttle shot forward, bursting from the cave into the open sky. The rebels' scout ship was right on them, its red lights blazing as it gave chase. Kai swerved, dodging a barrage of energy bolts that lit up the night like deadly fireworks. The shuttle rattled, alarms blaring, but Zara's calm focus steadied him. "Atmosphere," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "We can lose them in the ion clouds." Kai pushed the controls, the shuttle climbing steeply. The G-forces pressed them into their seats, and Zara's hand brushed his as she adjusted a dial. The touch was brief but electric, sending a jolt through him even as he fought to keep the ship steady. Her scent, wild, floral, uniquely her, filled the small cockpit, and he stole a glance. Her lips were set in a determined line, but her eyes flicked to his. And for a moment, the danger outside faded. The chase was relentless. The rebel ship matched their every move, its weapons grazing the shuttle's hull. Kai banked hard, weaving through a canyon of jagged peaks, the shuttle's engine screaming. Zara leaned closer, her shoulder brushing his, her voice low and urgent. "There's a narrow pass up ahead. If we time it right, we can trap them." "Trap them?" Kai shot her a look, adrenaline spiking. "You're crazy." She smirked, a glint of mischief in her eyes. "Trust me, human." Her confidence was intoxicating, and Kai nodded, gripping the controls tighter. They hurtled toward the pass, a tight, twisting gap between 2 cliffs. The rebel ship followed, its shots scorching the air. At the last second, Zara hit a switch, deploying a decoy flare that burst into a blinding explosion of light. The rebels swerved, crashing into the cliffside with a deafening boom. The shockwave rocked the shuttle, but Kai held it steady, guiding them through the pass and out into open sky. They were clear, for now. The shuttle soared into the ion clouds, their swirling electric haze cloaking them from sensors. Kai let out a shaky laugh, slumping back in his seat. That was too close. Zara's laugh was soft, almost musical, but it carried a tremor of relief. "You're not bad for a human, Kai." She turned to him, her violet eyes gleaming in the dim cockpit light. The air between them grew heavy, charged with something more than survival. Her hand rested on his arm, lingering longer than necessary, her touch warm through his sleeve. "You kept up with me." "Barely," he said, his voice rougher than he meant. Her closeness was dizzying, her lavender skin catching the faint glow of the controls, her fur gown slipping slightly to reveal the curve of her shoulder. He swallowed hard, trying to focus. "What now? We can't go back." Her gaze held his, intense and searching. "We head for Oralis, a neutral system. My allies there can protect us. But," she hesitated, her voice softening, "it's a long journey. Just you and me." The words hung in the air, heavy with possibility. The cockpit felt smaller, the hum of the engines fading into the background as their eyes locked. Her lips parted slightly, and Kai's breath caught. The danger wasn't over. Rebels could still be out there, and Nytheria was in chaos. But in this moment, it was just them, suspended in the stars, their bodies inches apart, the pull between them undeniable. Zara leaned closer, her voice a whisper. "Kai back there when we almost, I wanted to." Her fingers brushed his jaw, light as a feather, sending a rush of heat through him. He reached for her hand, his thumb grazing her palm. So did I. The shuttle hummed on, cutting through the ion clouds, but the real storm was brewing inside the cockpit, a spark of desire, a bond forged in danger, and a journey that promised to test them in ways neither could predict. The shuttle's engines thrummed softly, a steady heartbeat cutting through the electric haze of Nytheria's ion clouds. Kai and Zara sat in the cockpit, the air between them thick with unspoken words, their hands still touching, her fingers light against his, a spark that lingered like a promise. The stars beyond the viewport shimmered, a distant reminder of their fragile escape. But the tension in the small cabin wasn't just from the rebels they'd barely outrun. It was the pull between them, raw and magnetic, that made every breath feel heavier. Zara's violet eyes held Kai's, her lips close enough that he could feel the warmth of her breath. Then the shuttle lurched violently, a piercing alarm shattering the moment. "Damn it!" Kai snapped, jerking back to the controls as red lights flared across the panel. The ship shuddered, caught in a sudden gravitational pull. Zara's hands flew to the co-pilot's console, her movements swift but tense. "It's a tractor beam," she said, her voice sharp with alarm. "Someone's locked onto us. Rebels or worse." Her fox-like ears twitched, catching faint signals through the static. "They're pulling us toward a ship in orbit." Kai's heart pounded as he scanned the viewport. A massive, jagged vessel loomed ahead, its hull bristling with weapons, its dark silhouette blotting out the stars. It wasn't a rebel scout. This was something bigger, more sinister. "That's no Nytherian ship," he said, his gut twisting. "Who the hell are they?" Zara's face paled, her glowing patterns dimming slightly. "Dravik's raiders, mercenaries. They must have been hired by the rebels. Or they're here to exploit the chaos." Her voice dropped, a mix of fear and defiance. "They're scavengers of war, Kai. They take what they want, ships, tech, people." The word hung heavy, and Kai's jaw tightened. "They're not taking you." He slammed the controls, diverting power to the engines, but the tractor beam held firm, dragging them closer to the raider ship. Sparks flew from the console as the shuttle strained, its hull groaning under the pressure. Zara's hand grabbed his, her grip fierce. "There's a manual override for the beam disruptor," she said, unbuckling her harness. "It's in the rear compartment. I can reach it, but you'll have to keep us steady." "Zara, no." Kai started, but she was already moving, her fur gown swishing as she darted to the back. The shuttle rocked again, and he fought the controls, sweat beading on his brow. Through the viewport, he saw the raider ship's docking bay yawning open like a predator's maw, ready to swallow them whole. In the rear, Zara tore open a panel, her fingers working frantically over a tangle of wires and glowing circuits. "Almost there," she called, her voice strained. A loud clank echoed as the tractor beam tightened and the shuttle jolted, throwing her against the wall. She gasped but kept working, her white hair falling loose, framing her determined face. Kai's eyes flicked between the controls and the viewport. The raider ship was close now, its weapons locking on. Then a new alarm blared, a proximity warning. Something else was out there. "Zara, hurry!" he shouted, his voice raw. "We've got company!" A second ship burst from the ion clouds, sleek and silver, its hull marked with Nytherian royal insignia. "It's one of ours," Zara cried, hope flaring in her voice. "Palace guards. They must have tracked us." The Nitherian ship opened fire, blue energy bolts slamming into the raider vessel. The tractor beam flickered, and Kai seized the chance, pushing the shuttle's engines to their limit. "Zara, now!" With a final twist of wires, Zara triggered the disruptor. A pulse of energy surged through the shuttle, breaking the tractor beam's grip. The ship lurched free, and Kai banked hard, dodging a barrage of raider fire. The Nitherian ship drew the enemy's attention, giving them a window to escape. Zara stumbled back to the cockpit, collapsing into her seat, breathless. "We did it," she panted, her hand brushing his shoulder. Her touch sent a jolt through him, even amidst the chaos. "Head for the coordinates I'm sending you. Aurelius is our only shot." Kai nodded, inputting the coordinates as the shuttle sped away from the battle. The raider ship and Nitherian vessel clashed behind them, a dazzling storm of light and fire fading into the distance. But the relief was short-lived. A sharp beep from the console drew their attention, a blinking red warning. "What now?" Kai groaned, his knuckles white on the controls. Zara's eyes widened as she scanned the screen. "The disruptor overloaded the power core. We're leaking fuel. We've got enough to reach Aurelius, but..." She hesitated, her voice dropping. "We'll be stranded when we land." "Stranded?" Kai's stomach sank. "As in, no way back?" Her gaze met his, steady but laced with vulnerability. "Yes, just us, on an alien world with no backup. And the raiders, they'll hunt us." The weight of her words settled over them, the cockpit suddenly feeling smaller, more intimate. Kai's mind raced, stranded with Zara alone, with enemies closing in. Yet the thought of being with her, even in danger, stirred something reckless in him. Her lavender skin glowed faintly in the console's light, her lips parted as she watched him, and the air crackled with that same unspoken pull from before. "Then we'll figure it out," he said, his voice low, resolute. "Together." Zara's lips curved into a small, daring smile. "You're braver than I expected, human." She leaned closer, her hand resting on his thigh, the touch light but deliberate. "Or maybe you're just crazy." His breath hitched, the heat of her hand searing through him. "Maybe both," he murmured, his eyes locked on hers. The shuttle hummed on, carrying them toward Aurelius, but the real danger was the fire building between them, a spark that could ignite at any moment, even as the galaxy hunted them down. Then, a sharp crackle broke the tension. The comms panel lit up, and a distorted voice cut through. "Princess Zara, you can't run forever." It was cold, menacing, and unmistakably rebel. "We know where you're going. Aurelius won't save you." Kai's blood ran cold, but Zara's expression hardened. "They're bluffing," she said, though her voice wavered. "They have to be." But the comms crackled again, and this time, a hollow image flickered to life. A rebel leader, his face scarred and cruel, his eyes gleaming with triumph. "We have Elder Vexa," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "Surrender, or she dies." Zara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Kai's heart stopped as the hollow shifted, revealing Vexa, bound and bruised, her glowing patterns faint. The rebel's grin widened. "You have one day, princess. Come to us, or her blood is on your hands." The transmission cut out, leaving the cockpit in stunned silence. Zara's eyes glistened with unshed tears, her body trembling. "They have her," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Kai, I can't lose her." He reached for her, pulling her close, his arms steady despite the storm in his chest. Her warmth pressed against him, her scent enveloping him, and for a moment they clung to each other, two souls adrift in a galaxy gone mad. "We'll get her back," he promised, his voice fierce. "I swear it." But as the shuttle hurtled toward Aurelius, the rebels' threat echoed in Kai's mind. The stakes had just skyrocketed, and the path ahead was fraught with danger. What secrets did Aurelius hold, and how far would he and Zara go to save Vexa and each other? The answers lay in the stars, but they were running out of time. The shuttle's cockpit was suffocatingly quiet, the rebels' chilling ultimatum still ringing in Kai's ears as he held Zara close. Her trembling had eased, but her lavender skin was pale, her violet eyes clouded with fear for Vexa. The hollow image of her grandmother, bound, bruised, her glowing patterns flickering weakly, hung like a ghost between them. The shuttle hurtled toward Aurelius, its engines straining against the leaking fuel core, each second ticking down the rebels' one-day deadline. Kai's arms tightened around Zara, her warmth grounding him even as his mind raced. They were running out of options. In Oralis, a neutral system was their last hope, a place to regroup, plan, and somehow save Vexa. But the silence was shattered by a sudden, jarring beep from the console, followed by a lurch that nearly threw them from their seats. "Oh, come on!" Kai groaned, untangling himself from Zara to lunge for the controls. The shuttle's warning lights flashed in angry red, and a new alert blared. "Proximity alert! Unidentified object detected." His stomach twisted. "Please tell me that's not more raiders." Zara leaned over the console, her white hair brushing his shoulder as she scanned the readings. Her fox-like ears twitched, catching faint signals. "It's not a ship," she said, her voice tight but curious. "It's debris? No, a satellite cluster, maybe. We're too close to Oralis's outer orbit to avoid it." Kai's eyes widened as he peered through the viewport. A swarm of metallic objects glinted in the starlight, spinning chaotically like a storm of jagged knives. "A junk field? Now? You've got to be kidding me." He gripped the controls, his knuckles white. "Hold on, this is going to get bumpy." Zara strapped into her seat, her fingers flying over the co-pilot's panel to boost the shields. Oralis's outer orbit is littered with old tech, war relics, abandoned satellites. If we hit one, we're done. Her voice was steady, but her hand brushed his as she adjusted a dial, and the fleeting touch sent a spark through him, even in the chaos. "Just don't crash us, human." "Gee, thanks for the confidence," Kai shot back, a wry grin breaking through his tension. He banked the shuttle hard, weaving through the debris field. Shards of metal pinged off the hull, each hit making the ship shudder. One particularly large chunk, a twisted piece of an old warship, loomed dead ahead, and Kai yanked the controls, narrowly avoiding it. The sudden maneuver threw Zara against him, her body pressing into his side, her breath hot against his neck. Zara?" he stammered, his face heating as he tried to focus on the controls. "You're, really close." She glanced down, realizing her hand was gripping his thigh for balance. Her lips twitched into a mischievous smile, despite the danger. "What, you're complaining now? Focus, Kai, or we're space dust." He laughed, a nervous bark, and swerved again, dodging a spinning satellite dish. "Not complaining, just distracted." The shuttle groaned as another piece grazed the hull, and Kai cursed under his breath, steering them through the chaos. Zara's closeness wasn't helping his concentration. Her scent, wild and floral, filled the cockpit, and every brush of her arm sent his pulse racing. They cleared the debris field by a hair, the shuttle emerging into Oralis's upper atmosphere with a final, bone-rattling jolt. Kai let out a shaky breath, slumping back in his seat. "Okay, that was way to never fly with you again." Zara smirked, unbuckling her harness. "You love it. Admit it." She stood, stretching, her fur gown slipping slightly to reveal the curve of her shoulder. Kai's eyes flicked to her, then away, his face burning. She caught his look and raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "What? Never seen an alien princess stretch before?" He coughed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Not one who makes it look like that." The words slipped out before he could stop them, and he cringed, expecting her to laugh. Instead, her smile softened, and she stepped closer, her hand grazing his arm. "You're cute when you're flustered, human," she teased, her voice low, sending a shiver down his spine. But before he could respond, the console beeped again. A softer tone this time, signaling their descent. Oralis's surface came into view, a lush world of golden plains and shimmering lakes, dotted with sleek domed cities. It was breathtaking, but the sight only tightened the knot in Kai's chest. Vexa was still out there, and time was slipping away. They landed in a secluded clearing near one of the smaller domes, the shuttle's engines coughing as they shut down. The fuel leak had left them stranded, just as Zara had feared. Kai climbed out first, scanning the golden grass, swaying under Oralis's violet sky. The air was warm, heavy with the scent of alien flowers, and a strange, melodic hum pulsed faintly in the distance. Zara followed, her gown catching the breeze, and for a moment they stood side by side, taking in their new reality. "So this is Aurelus," Kai said, trying to lighten the mood. "Nice place to be stuck, I guess. Got any friends here who aren't trying to kill us?" Zara's lips twitched, but her eyes were distant, haunted by Vex's fate. "There's a contact in the city, an old ally of my grandmother's, Terran. He's a smuggler, but loyal. If anyone can help us get a ship and track the rebels, it's him." She hesitated, her voice softening. "But Kai, I don't know if we can save her in time." He turned to her, his hand finding hers, squeezing gently. "We will. I promised, didn't I?" Her fingers tightened around his, and the vulnerability in her eyes made his heart ache. But the moment was cut short by a rustling in the grass, a low, guttural growl that sent a chill down Kai's spine. Zara?" he whispered, stepping in front of her. "Please tell me that's just the wind." Her ears twitched, and she tensed, drawing a small, sleek blade from her gown. "Not wind. Predators. Aurelus has wildlife." Before Kai could respond, a massive creature burst from the grass. A six-legged beast with glowing red eyes and razor-sharp claws, its fur bristling like spikes. Kai yelped, stumbling back, and Zara shoved him aside, brandishing her blade. "Stay back!" she snapped, but the creature lunged, its claws grazing her arm. "Zara!" Kai shouted, his instincts kicking in. He grabbed a loose metal rod from the shuttle's hatch and swung it, smacking the beast's flank. It roared, turning on him, but Zara was faster, driving her blade into its side. The creature howled, collapsing, but more growls echoed nearby. "We need to move!" Zara grabbed his hand, pulling him toward the city dome. They sprinted, the grass whipping at their legs, the growls growing louder. Kai's heart pounded, not just from the danger, but from the sight of Zara, fierce, bloodied, her gown torn, yet still breathtaking. He couldn't lose her, not now. They reached the dome's edge, slipping through a maintenance hatch just as another beast lunged, its claws scraping the metal. Inside, the city hummed with life. Hover cars zipped overhead, and aliens of every shape and color bustled through glowing streets. Zara leaned against the wall, catching her breath, her arm bleeding but her eyes fierce. "You okay?" Kai asked, his voice rough with worry. He tore a strip from his sleeve, wrapping it around her wound. His fingers brushed her skin and she inhaled sharply, her gaze locking onto his. "I'm fine," she said, but her voice was softer, her hand lingering on his as he tied the makeshift bandage. "You didn't run. Most would have." He grinned, trying to diffuse the tension. "Yeah, well, I'm not most people. Also, I'm pretty sure you'd haunt me if I left you to that thing." She laughed, a bright, unexpected sound that eased the knot in his chest. But the moment faded as her expression turned serious. "Terran's hideout is close. We need to move before the rebels track us, or more of those beasts do." As they slipped into the bustling city, Kai's mind raced. Vex's life hung in the balance and Aurelus was no safe haven. The rebels' threat loomed, and the strange, vibrant world around them hid dangers of its own. Yet, with Zara's hand in his, her fierce spirit pulling him forward, Kai felt ready to face anything, even the awkward, thrilling pull of something deeper growing between them. The glowing streets of Auralus's domed city buzzed around Kai and Zara as they slipped through the crowded market, the hum of hover cars and alien chatter masking their hurried steps. Zara's hand was still in his, her grip firm but warm, her lavender skin catching the neon lights of the stalls. Her arm, wrapped in Kai's makeshift bandage, didn't slow her down, but the sight of her blood, vivid against her torn fur gown, kept Kai's heart racing with worry and something deeper, something that burned hotter with every glance. The rebels' threat echoed in his mind. One day to surrender, or Vexa would die. But here in the chaotic pulse of the city, with Zara's fierce determination pulling him forward, Kai felt a reckless hope that they could beat the odds. They wove through a maze of vendors hawking glowing trinkets and strange, writhing foods, heading for Terran's hideout. The air was thick with exotic spices and the faint buzz of energy shields, but Kai's focus was on Zara, her white hair swaying, her fox-like ears twitching at every sound. She moved like a predator herself, graceful and alert, and he couldn't help but notice the way her gown clung to her curves, the fur teasingly parted to reveal glimpses of her lavender skin. He shook his head, trying to focus. Not the time, Kai. Taryn's place is just ahead, Zara whispered, her voice low as she pulled him into a narrow alley. The walls glowed faintly, etched with alien runes, and the air grew quieter, more intimate. She stopped at a nondescript door, her fingers brushing a hidden sensor. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a dimly lit room filled with crates and humming tech. A grizzled alien, Taryn presumably, looked up from a workbench, his three eyes narrowing. Zara? Taryn's voice was gruff, his scales glinting under the low light. You're supposed to be on Nytheria. What's this human doing with you? He's with me, Zara said, her tone sharp but warm as she glanced at Kai. He saved Vexa's life and mine. We need your help, Taryn. The rebels have my grandmother. Taryn's eyes widened, and he gestured them inside, sealing the door. The room was a cluttered mix of smugglers' loot and high-tech gadgets, a faint hum of machinery filling the air. Rebels, huh? Nasty business. Sit, talk. But there were no chairs, just a low, cushioned platform covered in soft alien furs. Zara sank onto it, pulling Kai down beside her. The platform was small, forcing them close, their thighs brushing. Her warmth seeped into him, and he swallowed hard, hyper-aware of her nearness. She seemed to notice, her lips curving slightly as she leaned closer, her voice dropping to a murmur. Relax, Kai. Taryn's safe. Relax? He muttered, his face heating as her hand rested lightly on his knee. Kinda hard when you're, you. The words slipped out and he cringed, but her soft laugh sent a thrill through him. Taryn snorted, oblivious to their moment. Humans got a point. Your trouble, Zara. He rummaged through a crate, pulling out a holodevice. Let's see what we're dealing with. Rebels don't just snatch royals for fun. They'll want something big. Zara's expression darkened, but her hand stayed on Kai's knee, her fingers tracing absent patterns that made his pulse race. They want me, she said, to surrender or they'll kill Vexa. We have less than a day. Taryn cursed in a guttural alien tongue, his scales flashing. You need a ship, weapons, a plan. I've got a fast runner, stealth model, but it's not cheap, princess. We'll pay, Zara said firmly, whatever it takes. Kai's mind spun, stranded on Aralis, with rebels closing in and Vexa's life on the line. The stakes couldn't be higher. But sitting so close to Zara, her scent, wild, floral, intoxicating, clouding his thoughts, he felt a different kind of urgency. Her touch, light but deliberate, sent heat curling through him, and he couldn't ignore the way her eyes lingered on him, bold yet vulnerable. Taryn stepped out to prep the ship, leaving them alone in the dimly lit room. The silence was electric, the air heavy with unspoken tension. Zara shifted, her gown slipping to reveal more of her shoulder, the glowing patterns on her skin pulsing faintly. Kai, she said softly, her voice a caress. You don't have to do this. You could walk away, go back to your life. He turned to her, his hand finding hers, their fingers intertwining. And leave you? Not a chance. His voice was low, rough with emotion. I'm in this, Zara. All the way. Her breath hitched, and she leaned closer, her lips inches from his. The furs beneath them were soft, inviting, and the room seemed to shrink, the world narrowing to just them. You're not like anyone I've ever met, she whispered, her hand sliding up his arm, her touch sending shivers across his skin. Brave, stubborn, human. He grinned, his heart pounding. You forgot charming. Her laugh was soft, teasing, and she closed the gap, her lips brushing his in a fleeting, electric kiss. It was gentle at first, a spark that ignited something deeper. Kai's hand found her waist, pulling her closer, the fur of her gown soft under his fingers. She deepened the kiss, her body pressing against his, her warmth and strength overwhelming. The glow of her skin seemed to pulse faster, matching the rhythm of his racing heart. Her fingers tangled in his hair, and for a moment, the rebels, Vexa, the danger, all of it faded. But the moment was cut short by a loud clang from the back of the hideout. They pulled apart, breathless, as Taryn stumbled in, dragging a crate of weapons. Stars, you two, he muttered, his three eyes rolling. Save the romance for after we save your grandma, yeah? Kai's face burned and Zara laughed, a bright, unapologetic sound that made his chest ache. Sorry, Taryn, she said, though her eyes stayed on Kai, gleaming with mischief. Couldn't help it. Kai rubbed his neck, grinning despite himself. Yeah, she's persuasive. Taryn grunted, tossing them each a sleek energy pistol. Focus, lovebirds. The ship's ready, but I've got bad news. My contacts say the rebels are already in Oralis's system, tracking you. They've got a warship in orbit, and it's not alone. Zara's smile vanished, her hand tightening around the pistol. Then we move fast. Get us to that ship, Taryn. We're getting Vexa back. Kai nodded, the weight of their mission crashing back. The kiss, the heat of Zara's touch, lingered like a promise, but the danger was closing in. Taryn led them to a hidden hangar where a sleek black stealth ship waited, its hull shimmering like liquid starlight.
Brush Kai's again.
Her fingers lingering just long enough to send his pulse racing. Ready for this? She asked, her voice low, her eyes searching his. For you? Always, he said, and her smile was worth every risk. But as the stealth ship powered up, a new alert flashed on the console. A rebel transmission patched through from Oralis's network. The same scarred rebel leader appeared, his grin chilling. Princess, you're making this too easy, he sneered. We've got eyes on Oralis. Run all you want, we'll find you, and Vex's time is ticking. The screen went dark, and Zara's face hardened, though her hand trembled in Kai's. The stakes were higher than ever, and the galaxy seemed to conspire against them. But as the ship lifted off, slicing through Oralis's violet sky, Kai knew one thing for certain. He'd fight to his last breath for Zara, and for the chance to see where this fire between them could lead. The stealth ship sliced through Oralis's violet sky, its sleek hull cloaked by the shimmering haze of the planet's upper atmosphere. Kai's heart still raced from Zara's kiss, her taste lingering on his lips, her warmth a quiet fire in his chest. Her hand rested on his arm as they sat in the cramped cockpit, the hum of the engines a steady pulse beneath the rebels' chilling words echoing in their minds. We've got eyes on Oralis. Run all you want. We'll find you. Taryn at the controls muttered curses in his guttural alien tongue, his three eyes scanning the console for any sign of pursuit. Zara's face was set, her violet eyes blazing with determination, though Kai could feel the faint tremble in her grip. Vexa's life hung in the balance, and the clock was ticking down. Rebel warships still in orbit, Taryn growled, his scales glinting in the console's glow. But my cloaking tech's top-notch. They won't see us until we're right on top of them. Got a plan, Princess? Zara leaned forward, her white hair falling over one shoulder, the fur of her gown catching the light. We board their ship, find Vexa, and get out before they know what hit them. Their warship's big, but it's not built for stealth. We can slip in through a maintenance hatch. Kai raised an eyebrow, his pulse quickening at her boldness. You make it sound easy. What's the catch? She met his gaze, a flicker of worry in her eyes. The catch is, we don't know where they're holding her, or how many guards we'll face. And if we're caught? Her voice trailed off, but the weight of her words was clear. Taryn snorted, adjusting the controls. If you're caught, it's over. Rebels don't take prisoners, they make examples. But I've got a few tricks up my sleeve. Hold tight. The ship shuddered as it broke through Oralis's atmosphere, the stars stretching out before them like an endless sea. Kai's hand found Zara's, their fingers intertwining, and her touch sent a familiar jolt through him. Despite the danger, her closeness was a lifeline, a reminder of why he was here. Her lavender skin glowed faintly, her fox-like ears twitching as she scanned the console, and he couldn't help but marvel at her, fierce, beautiful, and utterly fearless. The rebel warship loomed ahead, a hulking beast of jagged metal and glowing red ports, orbiting Oralis like a predator circling prey. Taryn guided the stealth ship closer, its cloaking field shimmering faintly. Maintenance hatch is on the starboard side, he said, his voice low. I'll get you close, but you're on your own from there. Don't do anything stupid, human. Kai grinned, though his stomach churned. No promises. Zara squeezed his hand, her eyes locking onto his. Stay close to me, Kai. We do this together. They suited up, slipping into lightweight stealth gear Taryn provided, sleek, black suits that hugged their bodies, designed to deflect sensors. Zara's suit clung to her curves and Kai caught himself staring, his face heating as she smirked. "Focus, human," she teased, her voice a low purr that sent his heart racing. Terran docked the stealth ship against the warship's hatch, the connection barely a whisper. The hatch opened with a soft hiss, and Kai and Zara slipped into the rebel ship, their energy pistols at the ready. The corridor was dim, lit by flickering red lights, the air heavy with the hum of machinery and the faint tang of ozone. Every step echoed with danger, but Zara moved like a shadow, her blade gleaming in one hand, her pistol in the other. Kai followed, his senses on edge, hyper-aware of her every move. They navigated a maze of corridors, avoiding patrols by inches, their breaths shallow. Zara's hand brushed his as they ducked into an alcove, her body pressed close to avoid a passing guard. Her warmth, her scent, wild and floral, made his head spin, but he forced himself to focus. Vexa was close. He could feel it. They reached a sealed door marked with rebel insignia, and Zara hacked the panel with a small device, her fingers moving with practiced speed. The door slid open, revealing a holding cell. And there was Vexa, slumped against the wall, her glowing patterns faint, her white braids tangled. Zara gasped, rushing to her side. "Grandmother," she whispered, kneeling beside her. Vexa's eyes fluttered open, weary but sharp. "Zara, you shouldn't have come," Vexa rasped, her voice weak. "It's a trap." Before Kai could process her words, the cell's lights blazed, and a cold laugh echoed behind them. The scarred rebel leader from the transmission stepped from the shadows, flanked by a dozen armed guards. His grin was venomous. "Welcome, princess. And you brought the human, too. How sweet." Kai's blood ran cold as he raised his pistol, but the guards' weapons were already trained on them. Zara stood, shielding Vexa, her blade gleaming but useless against so many. "Let her go," she said, demanded, her voice steady despite the odds. "You want me, not her." The leader's eyes glinted, but his smile faltered as a low rumble shook the ship. Alarms blared, and the guards exchanged confused glances. "What the?" the leader started, but his words were cut off by a deafening explosion that rocked the corridor, throwing everyone to the ground. Kai scrambled to his feet, pulling Zara and Vexa behind a crate as debris rained down. Through the chaos, a new voice crackled over the ship's comms. A voice Kai didn't recognize, smooth and commanding, with a strange melodic edge. "Attention, rebel scum. This is Commander Ari of the Oralis Resistance. Surrender now or we'll tear your ship apart." Kai's jaw dropped. "Oralis Resistance? Since when?" Zara's eyes widened, a mix of shock and hope. "I didn't know they existed. Terran never mentioned them." The twist hit like a shockwave. Terran, the grizzled smuggler, hadn't just been helping them out of loyalty. He'd been working with a hidden resistance force on Oralis, one powerful enough to challenge a rebel warship. The ship shook again as energy blasts pounded its hull, the lights flickering. The rebel leader roared orders, but his guards were already scattering, caught off guard by the sudden assault. Kai seized the moment, grabbing Zara's hand. "We've got to move." He pulled her and Vexa toward the door, dodging a guard's wild shot. Zara fired back, her pistol's blue bolts dropping two rebels in their tracks. Vexa, weak but determined, leaned on Kai as they ran, her glowing patterns flaring with renewed strength. The corridors were chaos, rebels shouting, resistance fighters breaching the ship, their sleek silver drones cutting through the air. Kai and Zara fought their way back to the maintenance hatch, their bodies moving in sync, a dance of survival and trust. Her hand brushed his as they ran, a fleeting touch that grounded him amidst the madness. They reached the hatch, Terran's stealth ship waiting beyond. But as they climbed aboard, the rebel leader appeared, bloodied but alive, his weapon raised. "You're not leaving!" he snarled, firing a shot that grazed Kai's shoulder, searing pain ripping through him. Zara screamed his name, her blade flashing as she lunged, disarming the leader with a swift strike. He crumpled, but more rebels were closing in. Terran gunned the engines, shouting, "Get in, now!" They dove inside, the hatch sealing as the stealth ship tore away from the warship. Explosions lit up the viewport as the Oralis Resistance hammered the rebels, giving them cover. Kai clutched his shoulder, blood seeping through his fingers, but Zara was there, her hands gentle as she pressed a cloth to the wound, her eyes wide with worry. "You're going to be fine," she whispered, her voice trembling. Her fingers lingered on his skin, her touch a mix of comfort and something deeper, reigniting that fire between them. As the ship sped toward safety, Kai met her gaze, the pain fading under her intensity. The twist of Terran's secret alliance had saved them, but the rebels weren't done, and neither was the pull between him and Zara, a force as unstoppable as the stars themselves. The stealth ship streaked through the void, the rebel warship's explosions fading into the distance, as the Aurelus Resistance's assault gave Kai, Zara, and Vexa their narrow escape. Kai's shoulder throbbed where the rebel leader's shot had grazed him, but Zara's gentle touch, pressing a cloth to his wound, dulled the pain. Her lavender skin glowed faintly in the cockpit's dim light, her violet eyes locked on his with a mix of worry and something deeper, something that made his heart race despite the chaos. Vexa, slumped in a rear seat, was pale but alive, her glowing patterns flickering as she caught her breath. Terran, at the controls, grumbled about the ship's overtaxed systems, his three eyes darting between the console and the starry expanse ahead. The revelation of his ties to the Aurelus Resistance still hung heavy, a secret that had saved them but left more questions than answers. "All right, lovebirds," Terran said, his gruff voice cutting through the tension. "We're clear of the rebels, for now, but this ship's beat to hell, and we're low on fuel. We're landing at a Resistance safe house on Aurelus' moon Quarath. Don't get too cozy." Kai shifted, wincing as Zara's fingers brushed his wound, her touch lingering a moment too long. "Cozy's not exactly the vibe," he muttered, his face heating as she leaned closer, her white hair tickling his arm. Her fur gown was torn from their escape, revealing more of her shoulder, and he tried, really tried, not to stare. You sure this safe house is safe? Your last surprise was a bit explosive." Zara smirked, her fox-like ears twitching. "He's got a point, Terran. Any more secrets you're hiding? Like, say, an army of Resistance fighters?" Terran snorted, his scales glinting. "You're welcome for the save, Princess. The Resistance has been watching Aurelus for years. Rebels aren't the only ones stirring trouble. You're lucky I called him in." Vexa's weak voice broke in, hoarse but firm. "Enough bickering, we need a plan. The rebels won't stop and She coughed, her glowing patterns dimming. "I won't let Zara face them alone." Zara's expression softened and she moved to her grandmother's side, kneeling beside her. "You're not alone, grandmother. We'll end this." Her hand found Kai's, squeezing briefly, and the gesture sent a jolt through him, a reminder of their kiss in Terran's hideout. Brief, electric, and unfinished. The ship shuddered as it entered Quarath's thin atmosphere, the moon's surface a stark contrast to Aurelus' lush beauty. Jagged cliffs and glowing crystal fields stretched below, bathed in the eerie light of Aurelus' violet glow. Terran landed the ship in a concealed hangar carved into a cliffside, its entrance masked by holographic projectors. The safe house was a sprawling network of tunnels, lit by bioluminescent vines that pulsed like veins. Resistance fighters, aliens of every shape and hue, greeted them, their faces grim but welcoming.
Commander Auri, the voice from the rebel ship's comms, met them at the entrance. She was tall, her skin a shimmering gold, her eyes sharp with authority. "Princess Zara, Elder Vexa," she said, bowing slightly. "You're safe here, but the rebels are regrouping. We intercepted their comms. They're planning a strike on Aurelus to draw you out."
Kai's stomach dropped. "Draw her out? They've got no leverage now that we've got Vexa."
Ari's eyes flicked to him, assessing. "They've got something else. Our spies say they're holding a Netherian royal artifact, a crystal that controls the planet's core stability. If they destroy it, Netheria's ecosystem collapses." Zara's face paled, her hand tightening on Kai's. "The heart of Netheria," she whispered. "It's sacred. If they break it, my people, everything, is gone."
Vexa struggled to her feet, her voice fierce despite her weakness.
"Then we take it back. We fight."
Kai admired her fire, but his mind raced. A royal artifact? A planet-killing strike? This was bigger than he'd ever imagined. He glanced at Zara, her jaw set, her eyes burning with resolve. "Okay," he said, trying to sound confident. We sneak in, grab the crystal, save the planet. No big deal, right?
Zara's lips twitched, a spark of humor breaking through her tension. You make it sound like a walk in the gardens, human. She stepped closer, her hand brushing his chest, her voice dropping. But I like your optimism.
His face flushed, and he coughed, aware of Ari and Vexa watching. Yeah, well, someone's got to keep things light, he mumbled. But her touch sent his pulse into overdrive, her nearness a distraction he could barely handle.
Ari cleared her throat, her golden face unamused. Focus, you two. We've got a strike team ready, but the rebel base is fortified. You'll need to infiltrate their command center, underground, heavily guarded. Our intel's spotty, but we know the crystal's there.
The briefing room was a flurry of activity, resistance fighters prepping weapons and holomaps. Kai and Zara were fitted with upgraded stealth suits, their sleek material hugging their bodies like a second skin. As Zara adjusted her gear, her suit accentuated every curve, and Kai caught himself staring, again. She noticed, raising an eyebrow.
Problem, Kai?
He fumbled with his own suit, nearly dropping his pistol. Nope, just, these suits are tight, huh? Like, really tight. He winced at how dumb he sounded, and a nearby fighter snickered.
Zara laughed, stepping close enough that her breath grazed his ear. You'll survive, human.
Maybe. Her teasing tone was laced with warmth, and the brief contact sent a shiver down his spine. Vexa, now stabilized by a resistance medic, watched them with a faint smile. Young love in a war zone, she muttered, loud enough for them to hear. Stars help us. Kai's face burned, and Zara grinned, unbothered. She's just jealous, she whispered, nudging him. But the humor faded as Ori outlined the mission. Infiltrate the rebel base, steal the heart of Nytheria, and get out before the rebels triggered it. The odds were brutal, and the awkwardness of their flirtation was overshadowed by the stakes. As the team boarded a sleek infiltration craft, Kai and Zara found themselves squeezed into a tight compartment, their bodies pressed together in the cramped space. Her warmth, her scent, wild and floral, filled his senses, and he tried to focus on the mission, not the way her thigh brushed his. This is, cozy, he said, his voice cracking slightly. She smirked, her hand resting on his arm. Don't get too comfortable, Kai. We've got a planet to save. But her eyes held his, a mix of mischief and intensity that made his heart pound. The craft launched, slipping through Korath's crystal fields toward the rebel base. But as they approached, a new transmission crackled through the comms. Not the rebel leader, but a distorted, mechanical voice. Princess Zara, you think you've won? The heart is rigged. One wrong move, and Nytheria burns. Zara's breath caught and Kai's blood ran cold. The voice wasn't rebel, it was something else, something colder. Ori's face hardened. That's not their leader, that's Dravik's tech. The Raiders are back. The realization hit like a punch. The Dravik's Raiders, who'd nearly captured them before, were working with the rebels, or worse, playing their own game. The mission was no longer just about saving Vexa or the crystal. It was about outsmarting two enemies, with a planet's fate in the balance. As the craft descended, Kai gripped Zara's hand, her warmth his only anchor in the storm of danger and desire that lay ahead. The infiltration craft hummed through Korath's crystal fields, its sleek form cloaked in the moon's eerie glow as it sped toward the rebel base. Kai's hand gripped Zara's, her warmth steadying him against the chilling revelation of the Dravik's Raiders' involvement. The mechanical voice on the comms, the heart is rigged, one wrong move and Nytheria burns, echoed in his mind, a sinister promise that raised the stakes beyond imagination. Zara's violet eyes were fierce with determination, her lavender skin glowing faintly under the tight stealth suit, but her grip trembled slightly, betraying the weight of her planet's fate. Vexa, seated behind them, her strength slowly returning, whispered words of encouragement, her glowing patterns pulsing with renewed hope. Ori, commanding the craft, kept her golden face set, her focus razor sharp as the rebel base came into view, a fortified bunker carved into a cliff, bristling with defenses. We've got one shot, Ori said, her voice steady as she guided the craft into a concealed landing zone. The heart of Nytheria is in the central chamber. If the Dravik's rigged it, we'll need to disable their tech without triggering the failsafe. Move fast, stay sharp. Kai nodded, his shoulder still aching from the rebel's shot, but Zara's presence fueled his resolve. Her hand lingered on his arm as they disembarked, her touch a quiet promise in the chaos. "We do this together," she whispered, her fox-like ears twitching as she scanned the shadows. Her torn fur gown had been replaced by the stealth suit, but her grace was unchanged, and Kai couldn't help but feel a surge of admiration and something deeper that made his heart pound. The team slipped into the bunker through a ventilation shaft, the air thick with the hum of machinery and the faint crackle of energy shields. Ori led the way, her resistance fighters fanning out, their weapons ready. Kai and Zara stayed close, their steps silent, their pistols drawn. The corridors were a maze of cold metal and flickering lights, every corner hiding the threat of rebels or Dravex raiders. As they rounded a bend, a patrol appeared, 2 rebels, unaware. Zara moved like lightning, her blade flashing as she disarmed one, while Kai tackled the other, pinning him silently. Their eyes met, a shared thrill passing between them, and she flashed a quick, mischievous smile that sent his pulse racing. "Nice moves, human," she murmured, her voice low and teasing. "Learn from the best," he shot back, grinning despite the danger. Her laugh was soft, almost inaudible, but it warmed him in the cold bunker. They reached the central chamber, a vast cavernous room lit by the heart of Netheria, a massive glowing crystal suspended in a web of energy fields, its light pulsing like a living thing. But around it stood Dravex tech, sleek black devices with blinking red lights, their wires snaking into the crystal's core. A dozen rebels guarded the chamber, and at its center was the scarred rebel leader, his eyes gleaming with triumph. Beside him stood a Dravex raider, its mechanical limbs whirring, its face a blank mask of menace. "Welcome, princess," the rebel leader sneered, his weapon raised. "You're too late. The heart's rigged to blow, and Netheria with it." Zara stepped forward, her blade gleaming. "You're wrong. This ends now." Her voice was steady, but Kai could see the fear in her eyes, not for herself, but for her people. Ori signaled, and the resistance fighters struck, their energy bolts lighting up the chamber. Chaos erupted. Rebels fired back. Dravex drones whirred to life, and Kai dove behind a console, pulling Zara with him. Her body pressed against his, her breath hot against his cheek, and for a fleeting moment, the battle faded, their closeness a world of its own. "Stay with me," she whispered, her hand squeezing his. "Always," he said, his voice rough with emotion. They sprang into action, Zara's blade cutting through a drone as Kai fired at a rebel, their movements a seamless dance. Ori and her team pushed forward, but the Dravex raider lunged, its mechanical claws slashing at Zara. Kai tackled it, his pistol blasting its core, and it collapsed in a shower of sparks. The rebel leader roared, charging at Zara, but Vexa, frail but fierce, stepped in, her glowing patterns flaring as she activated a hidden Itherian device. A pulse of energy surged, stunning the rebels and disabling the Dravex tech. "The heart!" Vexa shouted. "Zara, you know what to do." Zara sprinted to the crystal, her fingers flying over the Dravex devices, disarming their triggers with a skill that left Kai in awe. But the leader recovered, raising his weapon. Kai didn't think. He dove, taking the shot meant for Zara. Pain seared through his side, and he hit the ground, gasping. "Kai!" Zara's scream cut through the chaos. She finished disabling the last device, the crystal's glow stabilizing, then ran to him, her hands cradling his face. "Don't you dare leave me," she said, her voice breaking, tears glistening in her eyes. He managed a weak grin, his hand finding hers. Not going anywhere. The pain was intense, but her touch, her desperation, kept him grounded. Ori's team overwhelmed the remaining rebels, the leader subdued, and the Dravex tech neutralized. The heart of Netheria pulsed steadily, its light bathing the chamber in warmth. Netheria was safe. Vexa, supported by a fighter, knelt beside Kai, her glowing eyes soft. "You saved us, human. You saved my granddaughter." Zara's lips brushed Kai's forehead, her touch tender, electric. "You saved me," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. The resistance secured the bunker, and medics rushed to Kai, stabilizing his wound. As they were airlifted back to Oralis, Zara never left his side, her hand in his, her lavender skin glowing under the stars. The journey back was quiet, the weight of their victory sinking in. Nytheria was safe, Vexa was alive, and the rebels were defeated, their Dravex allies scattered. Weeks later, Kai stood on a Nytherian balcony, his wounds healed, the twin moons casting silver light over the palace gardens. Zara stood beside him, her fur gown shimmering, her white hair catching the breeze. The heart of Nytheria pulsed in the distance, a symbol of their triumph. Vexa, fully recovered, had declared Kai a hero of Nytheria, but it was Zara's gaze that held him. "You could stay," she said, her voice soft, her hand brushing his. "Nytheria could use someone like you. I could use you." He turned to her, his heart full. "You think I'd leave after all this? You're stuck with me, princess." He pulled promise. Her warmth, her scent, her strength, it was everything he'd fought for. She laughed against his lips, her fox-like ears twitching. "Good, because I'm not letting you go." As they stood together, the stars above Nytheria twinkling, Kai knew he'd found more than adventure. He'd found a home, a purpose, and a love that spanned the galaxy. The rebels were gone, the heart was safe, and with Zara by his side, the universe felt infinite.